Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay, awesome. Okay, so good morning, everyone. My name is Elena from Hosted Technology Management. I am the project manager in this engagement, and I'm here with ConnectMaine staff, Vetro staff, and some of my project team members to host this workshop for the Infrastructure Grant Award recipients. The main goal of this presentation is to get you familiar with the new reporting procedures that ConnectMaine will be implementing to support the grants program moving forward. So I'm going to pass this over to ConnectMaine staff to give their introduction and to go over some administrative items.
All right, it looks like I got the first slide here, Peggy. I'm Stephanie. I'm the Assistant Director for ConnectMaine. As many of you know, we do have reporting documents currently for our grants program. ConnectMaine is obviously trying to update its grants program and deploy an online portal, but that is yet to occur. So we're still working with our documents, which many of you have applied before and are running grants currently or previously know that these documents are on our website. So this is the link to the documents. And then from our website, you can learn more about me and Peggy if you don't know much about us yet or already. So that's pretty much overview of the website for grants. On confidentiality, we just kind of wanted to get this up in front. And it really comes from our statute and rule. So we are very respectful of the confidentiality of private companies and their data. And Peggy, I don't know if you want to introduce yourself and speak a little bit more to this slide.
Yeah, so I'm the director of the ConnectMaine Authority. We have the statutory ability to declare things as confidential, but it is limited to sort of what it typically would be confidential, which is the data about what where you're serving and the any financial stuff. Those are sort of those are considered confidential data. You know, how you're performing the grant, whether you've completed the grant, all that kind of stuff is not confidential. So that's, or the service area. So that's the type of, so the way to sort of ensure that your document will be considered confidential or looked at as confidential would be to mark it as such, but to keep it sort of separate so that we don't have to like split up documents if somebody requests information from us.
And then finally, I just wanted to make a note that we are recording the workshop. So if you missed that web link, I will also put it in the chat and you'll have this workshop recorded for use with you and your other partners on your grants moving forward. And there was something else along those lines I was worried about. I don't remember, but if I think of it, I'll pop back in. So award disbursements, because bottom line, you know, it's nice to report data and give us better data and we can tell a better story for the state of Maine, but ultimately you want to know where's the money, show me the money. So the reporting is tied to the disbursements of the grant award. And so I just wanted to outline these for you guys up front. The commencement notice is when you request up to 25% of the initial grant award funds to get started. And so you don't actually have to have expended anything yet to request that amount in the notice of commencement. Then as your project gets started, you're required to track your expenditures and invoices and that kind of thing. And you'll submit 1 or 2 progress reports over the course of the year in which you can request disbursements to cover the expenses that you've been incurring up to 75% of the total award that you were granted. And then upon completion of the project and new reporting forms that have to be reviewed and approved, we'll then disperse the remaining 25% of your grant award. So that's how payment would occur. And all of this would also be outlined in the contract.
Just one back note on that. First off, I do notice these numbers add up to 125%. So we'll have to talk about that.
Yeah, so the first 25% is upfront, total of 75% through the progress reports.
Right.
So most people will ask for 25 upfront, but not always. And then basically we do hold the last 25% regardless of what you've requested. At least the last 25% is withheld until the completion is reviewed.
The other piece on this is that this is bond money. So how this works is that the Treasury Office asks us quarterly what we anticipate our needs will be, because the state does not borrow money until we're ready to use it. And so it would be very helpful for us if you could give us a rough projection based on our fiscal year quarters of when you think you're going to need funding. Because we will be asked by Treasury quarterly what we think we're going to draw down that quarter. And just so that we actually have money to draw down, it would be important for us to know sort of what your projection of how much money you're going to need which quarter. The other thing is that how the state does this is that they bond once a year. They go to the bond market once a year, and in between they try to manage the funding of these projects from the state cash pool. If they cannot do that and have to go to a bond anticipation note, then we as an agency have to pay the interest on that bond anticipation note. So we really sort of want to stay out of that last category. So don't way overestimate how much you're going to need in a quarter. Give us what you think you're going to need, and we will submit that to Treasury and make sure the money's there.
This will be very easy for the commencement notices for these projects because we've already made our request for the initial allocation. But moving forward, it will be important to try and be as accurate at your estimations as possible. So we can go to the next slide. You'll see this new table that requests the quarterly amounts in the commencement notice form. And I put the link in the chat as well as it was shared on previous slides. So after this workshop, we will send out an email to the applicant and points of contact listed in the application, a contract drafted that will be between the grantee or the fiscal agent and ConnectMaine. That will be responsible for ensuring that the rest of these reports are completed on time. And so then with that contract, you'd also submit the commencement notice. As the project then gets underway, at a point where you're ready to request another grant disbursement, or within the next quarter, you would submit a progress report. And then the following quarter, another progress report if the project is still underway. If for some reason you need an extension request on the time frame or the deadline of your project from what was proposed in the contract, then you could also use the progress report form as an extension request a year from now or so. At the completion of the project, the completion report does differ between the two types of projects. So you'll have to refer back to your award letter, the contract, or your application to be like, am I a community driven project or was I a provider expansion project, to fill out the correct completion report. Along with the completion report, which might feel somewhat familiar to anybody who's received grants prior, is something new, which is what we're going to cover most of this workshop on, is the auditing report form. And that's a new component of the completion report that will be required of all projects. And then finally, ConnectMaine is moving forward with real enforcement, I would say, of requiring grant tracking reports. It's something that's been in our rule for a long time, but very few grantees have actually submitted tracking reports over the years, and ConnectMaine has done a very poor job of outreaching to get those reports. So we're going to try to improve on that outreach and guidance to grant recipients to ensure that we're getting the information that tracking report is supposed to be gathering. Again, to show progress on the state's goals of expansion of universal broadband. So anyway, these are the report forms, and again, they're at the link that's in the chat. And we'll dig into the audit report form. I think we've got a couple breaks throughout the presentation where you can ask questions, and then we'll try to reserve some time at the end for a lot of questions. So think about where your question might have relevance, and try to squeeze it in. And of course, staff will always be available to answer your questions after the presentation as well.
Speaking of which, does anyone have any questions on, the confidentiality piece of the award disbursement?
And you will have to unmute yourself or raise your hand, but I think you're going to have to unmute yourself. And we can take questions in the chat too.
Yeah. Again, we'll have some space for questions at the very end of the presentation as well. So as Stephanie mentioned, the audit reporting form is this new piece that Tilson and Vetro have worked on creating for you. And the rest of this presentation will mainly focus on the requirements of that report. Okay, so diving a little bit deeper, these are the 5 categories of reports that we will be requiring from grantees. The first being the proposed funded service area audit. This is to verify that the project scope has been met according to the design that was awarded. The second is the technical audit, and this is to validate the performance of the technology. Then the spending analysis, to analyze project spending against the proposed budget and compare that to industry standards. And then the field validation, which is to verify the actual connections out in the field. And then the customer connection validation, which is to ensure that the end customer receives service at the quality that they have been subscribed to. So we're going to be breaking down each of these reports, starting off with the proposed funded service area audit. And I'm going to pass this over to Vetro to go over the details of the section.
Thanks, Elena. Yeah, for this first part of the audit report, we're really looking for you guys to provide the network as-built maps, showing how service was provided to these unserved service locations. In these maps, we need, quite a bit of detail, as you can see here on the map, of the service locations and the plant, that was used or was built to provide service. So like fiber or coax, splice points, MSTs, taps, splitters, CO locations, and so on. We also need attributes that go along with these. And so we'll be defining those and providing those to you. But for fiber, for instance, we might need the fiber size, the fiber tap, 4 taps, tap numbers, splitters, how many splices are there, things like that. And then also we want to be able to see the boundaries of the service areas, of OLT for your fiber plant and, boundaries for those HFC nodes for the cable plant, depending on what, service or, medium you're using there. And this will give us a good idea of where those services are, the service locations are that can get service, and it'll help us, provide a better picture of broadband service across the state of Maine. Another big point here is that the maps must be prepared by a professional engineer or a network engineer that has substantial experience, and you also have to provide their credentials. And then finally, if there's also any existing, facilities or plant in that area, those also must be supplied and submitted with, the similar information that you see above. And so again, this will just give us a complete picture, knowing, who's being served and how they're being served. And it kind of, goes right into the other parts of the audit report that we have. The next one here is just a picture of what we're kind of looking for. And, here you can see the different, types of plant, the different, things like poles, fibers, splice points, service locations, defined by the different colors on the map and the different symbols. Again, shape files are a preferred format, a little bit easier for us to, import into the system or for you to import into the system. And we'll be providing a template for those, like I said before, before anything, needs to be submitted. Next slide. And so here it just, kind of details a little bit further, the attributes, that we need you to provide along with each, plant item on the map. So here for the particular fiber, you're able to see, things like fiber type and fiber size and the length of the fiber. And so we need that detail in order to, do a complete audit of the system and, know exactly where these facilities are out in the field. And then finally, here we have the Vetro fiber map system. This is where the shape files and KMZs are going to be imported, and it's going to allow ConnectMaine to, create a single source of truth of the broadband picture across the state of Maine. It's called the ConnectMaine Broadband Intelligence Platform, or BIP for short. Here's a screenshot, like I said, and it's just going to allow us to capture and visualize the data, either from the community or the ISP. And, based on the audit, the application will switch. Basically our goal is to be able to switch unserved locations to served locations on the map. And, this data is going to be made, publicly available, for future grant rounds. So, people will know where the unserved locations, actually are, throughout the state. And finally, as part of, becoming a grantee in this last round, May 2021 round, each grantee is going to have access to this Vetro Fiber Map platform in order to, provide a more seamless data flow, both to and from ConnectMaine's, broadband intelligence platform. And, this access is really going to provide access, allow you to access the data regarding broadband across the state, give you the ability to import files, that we've discussed here, or design the system, the data directly into the system. And, finally, the ability to provide, future grant rounds, in the system as well. So hopefully that just gives you a little background on, why we're asking for this information and, where it's ultimately going to end up and, what the intended purpose is. So any questions about any of that data?
Just one question. Will that access to that map, either the BIP or the Vetro Fiber map, be available to the communities, the towns, as we evaluate our situation and what's been built out for us?
Yeah, so there'll be, the platform will be available. There's also going to be a public facing map. And certain data layers, will be shared, kind of going back to the confidentiality that we were talking about before. You'll have, certain data that you can see across the state, and then you'll definitely have, your data, for your service area, but you're not going to be able to see other providers, where they're creating applications and things like that. So does that answer your question?
I think so. Thank you.
Great. Anything else?
All right, so next we're going to be discussing the second piece, which is the technical audit. And this is going to be presented by Mike, our consulting engineer.
Thanks, Elena. So what we're looking for is the OTDR traces from either the OLT or the CMTSs, whether or not it's fiber to the home or cable TV, the hybrid fiber coax systems. We're looking for two traces of the wavelengths, 1310, 1490, 1550, or 1625 nanometers. We're just looking, like I said, looking for two of those wavelengths. Looking for the total distance of the link loss, splice losses, the microbends, and the return losses of the distribution and fiber and the feeder cables. Looking for identification on the specific fibers that were actually tested as well. For excuse me, for projects that are 10 miles or less, looking for 12 fibers to be tested in 24 fibers for anything between 11 and 30 miles, and 96 fibers for projects over 30 miles. These formats can be in any of the following CSOR, SOR produced PDFs, or any other OTDR produced PDF. And the cable in these plants should be comply with the TIA 568 performance standards. Excuse me. And we just have some little knowledge here of like connector loss. These would be the, we were looking to have this come in under, obviously under these numbers, 0.75 dB for connector loss and 0.3 dB for a splice loss and 0.5 dB loss for the 13, 10, 15 nanometers. Next slide, please. So this is one of the OTDR traces. We are looking for an A to Z trace. You can see here in the diagram that it starts off in the very beginning of the middle of the diagram itself. You can see the end connectors. That's your A location. End connectors at the end. B connection. Z location. I'm sorry. And and you see in the middle there's actually a splice, and it's actually detailed with the footages. So this should show an A to B location and then a B to Z location with the footages, the total footage from A to Z. Next slide, please. Excuse me. We're also looking for the manufacturer specifications on the equipment being used, fiber, splice enclosures and whatnot. These should show the losses for 1310, 1490, 1550, 1625 nanometers. What type of transmitters are being used, OLTs and the SFP lasers. Also splice enclosures, MSTs, and again, like a high level design of the network. Customer premises equipment, ONTs, ONUs, and DOCSIS modems. Fiber management equipment such as pre-terminated shelves and fiber distribution hubs. So just a spec sheet of the equipment that you'll be, and materials that you're using. Looking for a high level edge core transport access logical diagram of the IP and OLT network, showing the hubs consistent with the maps and the predicted data flow upstream and downstream of your network. Looking for what type of technology that you're going to be using. Is it going to be a GPON, fiber to the home, another type of fiber to the prem, or a cable TV hybrid fiber cable system? If GPON, EPON, or RFOG, we were looking for what type of technology that you're using, what kind of split out in the fields. Is it 1x32, is it 1x64, 1x8, 1x4? And for the hybrid fiber cable, we're actually looking for the maximum and minimum tap outputs right out before it hits the drop level. And next one. And this is just an idea of what we're kind of looking for the high level design. Any questions?
So I know that was a lot for the technical piece, and there may not be a lot of the technical representatives for your projects on this call right now. So please feel free to share some of these slides or this recording with applicable parties, and then come back to ConnectMaine staff with any questions. Otherwise, I think we can just go forward, and then if you do think of a question, we can address that at the very end. So next, we're going to be discussing the spending analysis report. So this spending analysis requires a completed Excel sheet that essentially itemizes your project costs from your invoices. We have a template of the spreadsheet that's posted online, and I will also show you an example in the next slide. But you will still need to provide a copy of proof of payment for project costs. This can be like a scan of an invoice saved as a PDF and then emailed it to us. So you can take the time to read all the expenditures that we'll need proof of, but basically it's just any applicable project cost invoices, especially ones that were identified in the project budget. So the spreadsheet template is pretty straightforward. We're looking for fields such as the invoice date, the invoice number, vendor or description, and the amount broken out into the committed dollars and the grant dollars. So what's important is that these costs should be categorized by including the line item in the tab that best describes the function of the cost. So you can kind of see here, this is an example of some of the tabs that are shown in the spreadsheet. There's only 5 categories: the network and access equipment, outside plant, drop equipment and CPE equipment, professional services, and then a bucket for all the other project costs. So I know that there may be cases where invoices may have items from the same vendor that may fit into 2 categories. In that case, depending on what equipment or service it is, whatever cost is higher, just categorize it based on that. So this screenshot is an example of the network tab filled out. These are kind of dummy numbers here, but it kind of gives you an idea of what we're looking for. Please make sure that you're entering the dates in red, these fields right here. And then also, when you can, add some detail. For example, you can see here that there is company labor. Make sure to specify whether labor is in-house or contract labor with the actual company. So unlike the other reports that we have and will be mentioning in this section, this will actually be submitted throughout the life of the project. So ConnectMaine talked about the commencement notice and the 1 to 2 progress reports that are going to be submitted before the project ends. This spreadsheet should be submitted along with those reports. So with the commencement notice and maybe twice with the project progress reports, and then after project close again. So this will allow the staff to reimburse you in a timely manner and also help with budget tracking. So any questions on the spending analysis requirements?
I think,
no. I was just going to say, if there aren't any on spending, Ted had a question before we got started on that. You do need to unmute yourself, unfortunately.
My question is, J.R. Gibson isn't able to do it for Alexander today, and I've worked with the project. I started this, but he kind of worked together. But a lot of this technical stuff, this will come from Pioneer Broadband, which will be building out our system in Alexander. Would that be correct?
That is correct. As I've mentioned in the chat, we are recording the workshop. There will be a PDF form of it. So if you have an ISP partner on your project, you'll definitely want to be sharing this workshop with them so they're prepared for what's going to be required as they start building out this project. It'll also be important for applicants to really understand this or consider it as you guys are reviewing the contracts that are going to be emailed to you. The signatory on the contract is responsible for ensuring that the projects are conducted and completed in compliance, but you'll obviously need your ISP partner to be heavily involved on the technical side of this.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Stephanie. Peggy, was there something that you wanted to add, or was it about this question?
it was that we had a question. That was it.
Okay, perfect. So unless there's any other questions, I think we can move forward to the field validation and customer connection reports. And this will be presented by Chris, our supervisor of field consulting.
Good morning, or good afternoon, I'm sorry. Basically what I do is I come out and we do field audits. I'll kind of go over here, give you an idea of what we're doing and how we do it. First of all, when we come out to do an audit, there should be an escort provided by the ISP who understands the plant, knows familiarity of, buildings, where the equipment is, and has access to cabinets, buildings, and so on and so forth. What we do is we start at the central office of where we're serving the particular recipients, customers who are receiving this. We look at the equipment, make sure the equipment's activated, powered up, that it's connected to transport. Once we verify all of that, we take photographs to document that we actually saw the equipment and it's there and operational. From there, what we do is a lot of these grants are extensions off existing plan, but what we want to do is we will drive out from the central office to that location, and we will look at the outside plant. We look at the strand, make sure all the lashing is secure. Sometimes agricultural equipment might clip the strand and it'll break the lashing, or there can be other events that cause issues. So we do go and verify all of that. We look for down guys, make sure that they're properly installed, and a lot of times people will go out and put the down guys up and they'll coil them up at the base of the pole, and then they might forget to go back and put a few in the ground. So we look for all of those. We'll go out to the FDHs if you have them in the field. We open up the cabinets, we photograph the cabinets. We look to make sure that everything is neat, clean, organized. We want to make sure everything's within industry standards and that everything is safely, installed and according to manufacturer's specifications. We look at the craftsmanship. Again, we look to make sure that everything is lashed properly, make sure everything has proper clearances, make sure that, there isn't material left on the ground, that splice cases are put back up on the strand, and, expansion loops are stowed properly on the strand. So we make sure that, all of that is taken care of and that everything is complete. And that's all goes with, consistency of looking at the project. What we do is I have a tablet that I bring out with the plant that you've designed. And I verify that there's supposed to be a splice case on this pole, or there's supposed to be a node. If you're doing an HFC plant, it's on this pole. Amplifiers are actually built the way it was designed. And just to make sure that everything didn't change in the field and not get updated, make sure everything is exactly as it's supposed to be. If we identify any deficiencies when we do their desktop audit, we place pin drops, and what I do is I come out and I look to make sure that that piece has been remediated, so that everything is complete as it should be. Next slide. Okay. Verifying customers to make sure that they're connected. Depending on what type of service you provide, whether it's GPON, EPON, or RFOG, we're looking for an image, a screenshot of the OLT and the ONT. We have examples that we'll get to in just a second, but what we're looking for is a screenshot to make sure that, that OLT is active and it's talking to the ONT in the field. Screenshot of the ONT, that it's got proper levels and signal and all that type of stuff. For HFC projects, we're looking at screenshots of the CMTS and the cable modem showing that both of those ends are active. The third piece that we're looking for is a billing statement excluding personal information. We're not concerned about who the people are. We're more concerned about the address, and make sure that that address is being served and that they're actually paying for the service that they're subscribing for. Here we have a couple of screenshots. The one on the left, you can see is a billing statement. If you look under the blue line there, you see they're paying for internet service, 75 down by 10. There's a little diagram at the bottom. You may or may not have that particular diagram in your system. This particular screenshot we were able to capture just in case, to give you an example of what we're looking for. You can see where the OLT is on the left. It's what it's connected to, how it goes to the field, the ONT in the field, and the actual services that the customer is getting. The screenshot to the right is an OLT. Again, it's providing us information about what the OLT is doing, its transmit signal, its receive power. And that just gives us verification that, yep, there's the address that we're going to. Here's the OLT that it's actually coming off of. And if we go to the next screen, we have screenshots of from the ONT. It tells us that the link is up, what our receive level is from the OLT. It tells us the transmit power. If you look at the screen on the right there, it'll tell us how many hours and stuff it's been up, so that we know that the customer is actually up and running. It's been up and running for, you know, an extended period of time. And we're looking just to make sure that everything here is operational and it's good, and that, you know, that address is actually being served.
So Jeff Tarbucks has a question.
Oh,
Yeah, sorry about that. So just stepping back a little bit, it looks like this is you're going to be doing these audits at the completion to verify the actual completion for the overall effort. So that was the field audit, and then the customer validation. You're checking every single customer. So if we have 200 new customers, you'll be checking every single one of those 200 customers.
well, here, let me put it this way. The field audit, we will do it once the audit is, the build is complete, and we've verified that if there was any remediation that needed to be done, that you've completed that remediation before we come to the field. Once we verify all that, we come out and do the field audit. The customer piece is something that will be an ongoing thing, because, you know, it could take you a week to connect all your customers. It could take you a couple of years to connect all that. So that's really, you know, you will supply that information. I think ConnectMaine will have a variable of how many they're actually looking for. They could probably answer that question a little bit better than I could for you.
So if on the customer then reports, what's the trigger that would cause us? Because it would be staggered over time as people are connected. So what's the trigger when we would send in this customer connection information?
You'd send any that you have at the completion of the project. So when you fill out your completion report and submit that with the audit form, you would fill out this section as well with whatever information you do have at that point.
And it
That
looks
would
like
be the initial trigger.
Yeah. Okay. So at the completion, and there would be a collection of this screenshots or information pulled off of the provider's network that shows the customer information.
Correct.
And you're not interfacing directly with customers in doing this. It's interfacing with the provider.
Absolutely. We don't see customers whatsoever. We only, like I say, when I come out, I generally have an escort who knows the system intimately and can answer pretty much any questions that we have. Depending if you have external equipment on the side of the house, sometimes if it looks appropriate and safe and whatnot, and we're not going to disturb it, and we may take a picture of it, you know, any exterior equipment. But if that's not the case, that's just, it is what it is.
Thank you.
Stephanie, I have a question. This is David. Is it also true ongoing, after the completion, that you also want some updates yearly for a certain period of time, on how services are connected, or how many?
The grant reporting, or the grant tracking report, is filed annually for 5 years, starting the year after completion. So you'll do your completion report and get us as much information you have on connected customers at that time. Part of the contract is basically, what did you propose to do? And, if there was proposal to connect so many unserved people, that is what we're validating. So we'll need to collect that information to validate that the project is in fact completed. So it may look different for different projects. Some projects are so small, everyone gets connected at completion, we get the information up front, we do the audit, everybody moves on. Other projects are massive. They're entire towns or entire regions. And this is going to take some time to get the information necessary to complete, the validation process. So the grant tracking report asks for the information on connected customers at a more general level, but there's also the opportunity to kill two birds with one stone. For example, with the grant tracking report, if you double up the data filing with the broadband service availability information required in grant tracking, then you can get both done with the data files that are being submitted. So there are efficiencies that we're trying to build into the system to make it as smooth as possible. The other question that came up is like, do you need this for every single customer? Again, we have to validate that the project proposed is being completed. So I don't have a cut and dry black and white answer for you. It's going to depend on the project, and we can get into those negotiations as we iron out the contracts.
Well, the one last thing I'd like to add into here is that things that we're looking for is that making sure that grantees are complying with manufacturer specifications. In my experiences, there's been some places that have implemented their own specifications, which were outside the manufacturer specifications. You must comply with the manufacturer specifications of the material and equipment that you're utilizing.
So there's a few different ways to basically answer that the project has been completed as proposed, but that's basically what we're trying to validate here. It's really unlikely that ConnectMaine is going to ask for every single bill and every single ONT. That's just too onerous, and it's not useful, right? I mean, the idea here is to verify that the project is complete. So again, I don't have a cut and dry answer for you, but we don't suspect it's going to be 100%. Peggy is questioning whether it needs to be more than 5%, for example. So we'll try to get those answers because they are dependent project by project with the applicants themselves. It looks like we have a John and Tim have questions. John, do you want to, oh, you are unmuted, go ahead.
Thank you. So I think some of my questions have already been answered, but let me just follow up with the validation that you've talked about it. And I think I understand what you're saying, but let me just confirm. Is this to ensure that the project is meeting regulatory standards and in complying with certain, let's say, electrical standards of quality, or is it more geared toward ensuring that the project is delivering according to the scope of the project that we're signing up to deliver to our, to our town? So I'm not sure I understand the purpose of the validation. Is it to make sure that things are done properly, or that you're doing what you said you would do?
It's actually both. We're looking to make sure that you're not running strand through the middle of the electrical space on a pole so that you can get fiber through. That would be unsafe. So we're verifying that there's proper clearances between utilities and other carriers, but we're also validating that yes, the plant was built according to the design that was approved.
Okay, good. Thank you for that clarification. So I'll just ask one more quickly. What we're signing up to deliver is access to broadband. So we're making service available in those areas where there is none today. That's what we're seeking to achieve, but there is no guarantee that some folks will in fact connect. It's their choice. We're making service available where it's not today, but whether or not somebody chooses to subscribe with the ISP, that's up to them to decide. So what I heard you to say is we have 5 years to deliver as much information as we can about who in fact ultimately subscribes. Did I hear correctly?
Yes, but be aware that most project proposals come with anticipated estimated subscription rates, right? So ConnectMaine understands that not 100% of the potential customers end up subscribing for a variety of reasons. So we wouldn't be looking for that type of completion or that level of completion, for example. And that's why it does become project by project specific.
Okay, thank you for much.
You're welcome. Tim, you need to unmute yourself.
I have too many questions to ask verbally. I'll just write them in an email.
All righty. Brian, unmute yourself.
I too have a multitude of questions, and I will follow up in writing as Tim suggested but a couple of them are, first of all, there may not be specific invoices tied directly to a project that will make sense. I mean, an ISP may pull all of the fiber for a project out of inventory that was purchased over the last 2 years in different buckets. Is tracking all of that down may be a burden. So I'm wondering, is that really your intent, to get copies of all of the invoices for all of the equipment for a specific project, regardless of when it was purchased?
I can let Tilson answer in more detail, but the purpose is to validate the spending that is proposed in the budget in the application against what was actually expended and compare that to what was actually built. So making sure that 1 + 1 = 2 is really the important piece.
So if we have a contracted rate for fiber, for 48 count fiber, that we pay per foot, is that a sufficient input, or do you need copies of the actual invoices?
Well, generally speaking, there would be an invoice that, now are you purchasing the fiber and having your contractor come in? Is your contractor purchasing the fiber and installing it
It
themselves?
could be both ways.
Okay, in that scenario, if the contractor is purchasing it, you're going to provide an invoice that will show, you know, X amount of feet installed, and then you should have a labor cost against that.
No,
You're gonna have
that's
material,
that's the invoice for construction, but you're
Right.
talking about invoices for materials.
Well, that's what I just asked you. If your contractor is providing the material as well as the labor, then that should all be on an invoice providing all that information. How many feet, and then the labor cost.
All right,
Okay.
so if we're purchasing the equipment and we hire a contractor to install it, then you
And
need a copy of the invoice for the equipment that was purchased and a
Yeah.
copy of the invoice for the contractor,
Correct.
even if that equipment was purchased 3 years ago.
You should still have a record of it someplace.
And
Well,
then
yeah, but yeah.
so then let's say I purchase 1,000 splice cases and I'm working those out of inventory across 10 different projects. Do I need to provide the same invoice for each of those 10 projects?
So we will need individual copies for individual projects. Unfortunately, our systems are still by project, not by applicant, not by ISP. So by project, we will need a copy of the grant reporting form and a copy of all of the supporting documentation for the grant reporting forms.
All right.
I think other documentation types were listed under the spending analysis. If the word invoicing is triggering people, take a look at the auditing form. And again, you can, these types of questions are kind of unique to certain projects. So asking the questions that are specific to your project of Peggy and me through the ConnectMaine email address would probably be the most efficient way to get answers on these things and get the clear and cut answers.
Yeah,
But definitely if you have questions that you think are applicable to most projects, that this would be a great time to try and answer those in the next 10 minutes.
Yeah, that's what these are just generically across, there's not a specific project. Now, Tilson was explaining that they're going to be checking the clearances for stringing the strand on the poles and so forth. Isn't that the responsibility of the pole owners? I mean, are we not, it sounds like ConnectMaine is going to be doing the same work that the pole owners do. And I'm trying to understand why.
what we're looking at when we come out and looked at, I'm not going to have a stick measuring every single pole. That's not how that works. When we go by, and I can give you an instance, I was out at the place and there was a pole that clearly had insufficient clearance between the power and it was an HFC network. Okay, it was clearly not there. What had to be happen is that pole had to be replaced at the owner's expense, and they had to have all the utilities come in, upgrade all their services on that particular pole to meet spacing requirements. It was a safety issue. We're not going to measure every single pole. That's not what we're out there to do. But obvious things that are in clear safety violation will be addressed.
All right.
And actually, in your own defense, I guess you should be looking at those things on yourself anyways, because if you're doing a new build and someone goes out to look at that pole to do make ready, that should have already been determined that that pole is not safe and it should be replaced.
So, okay, just one final question. All of this information is going to be filed confidentially. What protections or guidelines are in place to restrict that information within Tilson? So in other words, Tilson's going to have all this data on all of these service providers and consultants and so forth. And Tilson provides all of those services, and they're also a network operator and a ISP. What protections are in place within Tilson to ensure none of this information gets over to the side of Tilson that competes with or supports ISPs?
This audit work is going to be done by the Broadband Consulting Group, which is completely separate from our OSP divisions, and there will be no crossover. The people that talked in this call are going to be the people that are going to be performing this audit, and these are all exclusively within the Broadband Consulting Group.
Okay, thank you very much.
Tim, do you have a question, a general question for most applicants?
I do. I have a question related to some of the same stuff that Brian was just talking about, but I do have a question because we are planning on being able to do construction for more than one of these partners that has received ConnectMaine grants in this last round. And I've been stockpiling fiber for the last 2.5 years, knowing that there was going to be a glut on fiber. And I don't serialize my fiber rolls, so I can't tell you which particular roll came from which particular shipment. So I'm having a hard time figuring out how I'm going to justify going back and just giving you all of my, I can just give you all my invoices, I guess, for every roll of cable I've ever purchased, but I can't tell you with certainty that the roll that I grabbed to do someplace in central Maine is a roll that was on an invoice that is specifically dated and time-stamped 3 years ago. I don't know how I'm going to be able to do that. And I think that's going to be a real question for anybody else that's put fiber up in a store to look forward to this particular construction season, because we all know that it's going to be a problem getting material. That's one question that I have that you may not be able to answer now, but I'd like to consider that something that we can get answered. The other thing is I'm very uncomfortable with having Tilson go behind our construction crew. And they're people that we bid against in other jobs. And you can tell me as much as you want to that the things are separate, but any corporate worth its salt is good at making sure that we tell everybody that. But deep down inside, our information is going to be vulnerable, and the people that we bid against and our peers are going to be coming in and looking at the network construction we do. And it really seems like it's a conflict of interest in my opinion.
Tilson did address their potential conflict of interest and how they create these walls within their organization when they responded to our RFI/RFP for this grant verification and validation process. And ConnectMaine felt comfortable with that and approved Tilson Technology as the consultant and contractor for this work with ConnectMaine. So if in reviewing the confidentiality measures and proprietary measures that Tilson puts in place, doesn't leave you comfortable with moving forward with these granted projects, that's something that I'm sure Peggy and I would be happy to discuss further with you. This is the nature of where we are right now. And ConnectMaine itself feels confident behind what Tilson has put forth.
Well, I'm not discounting Tilson's abilities. They're a top-notch firm. What I'm saying is that there are conflicts of interest, whether you think there are or not, that many people on this call just aren't going to tell you that's the way they feel. But anyway, I don't know all the ins and outs of whatever NDAs you have and contracts you have, but it really seems to me that the ConnectMaine Authority should have chosen someone that wouldn't be likely to bid against other people in these jobs to do this oversight work. And I'm sorry, that's a frank opinion of mine. And I'm not going to forego the grants because I'm upset that Tilson's going to be, coming in and looking at things, but I do have a problem with that. And it may or may not impact how we move forward in the future with ConnectMaine Authority.
At this point, I'd just like to give another overview. The so what, I guess, of all of this is that ConnectMaine is having to deploy even significantly more funding than it's ever deployed in all of its history before. And that funding is coming with strings. It is very much transparently public dollars that need to be accounted for. And so whether it's the bond fund or whether it's federal dollars, as ConnectMaine has to increase its auditing responsibilities, that trickles down. And so these grant verification and validation processes are important to help ConnectMaine in its reporting of not only being efficacious with funds, but also showing the progress that we're making on statewide expansion of broadband. So we really do appreciate all of the partners that apply for grants, that see granted projects all the way through to completion and is really part of, expanding broadband. We couldn't do it without internet service providers that are very community oriented and are taking on these projects. So thank you to the community partners and to the internet service providers who are willing to jump through these hoops. And at the end of the day, no hoop is free, no lunch is free, and it's going to come with the cost. And if you see it as potential risk, that is your perspective. We thank you for making the consideration to help us get this job done. I see that it's 2 o'clock. Elena, do you have wrap up before we take any other questions into the next half hour? I want to be respectful of those who weren't planning to stay for more than an hour.
I just want to wrap up by saying that I know that we're going to get some emails with some more direct questions. And if we do notice that there are some common questions within these, we may opt to do some sort of Q&A session just to eliminate some of the back and forth with emails. So that may be down the road somewhere.
Could you also, if you have common questions, can you share those results to the group here in general?
I think that's a great idea, Stephanie. Maybe we can try to think of a way we can maybe like put some sort of document online or also send an email out to the applicants.
Email.
Yeah, absolutely. We're going to be trying to providing, more staff assistance through the implementation of projects, both planning and infrastructure. So we'll figure out a way to make sure that everyone's getting the same information. Great. Well, thank you again for those that joined us, and we'll continue, or at least I will continue to take questions for the next half hour or so as we have them in a more general form for everyone. as questions get more and more specific about individual projects, I will defer those for later. Thanks, Tilson and Vetro. You're welcome to stay on as long as you'd like, or you're welcome to drop off. It's to you. So Tim, I see you first. So unmute yourself again, please. Or
Sorry.
that might be just an old hand. I don't know.
That was an old hand. I was doing an email. Yeah, I'm good. Thanks.
Thank you. Ted. I do need you to unmute yourself.
Okay. The question is, the final 25% is paid when the project is completed or after customers sign up. And Alexander, we're looking for a project completion with Pioneer the end of this year, the beginning of next year. Would we then have to wait till we start signing up our 75 customers that we need to really make sure we pay for this?
That is, again, a very specific question to an individual project. What you proposed will be outlined in your contracts, and the completion report is looking to validate that the project is in fact complete. So it depends on what you're using for your metrics of completion. If that includes actual hookups and a certain subscription rate, then you will need to meet those for the completion of the project.
Just a couple of other quick comments. One is just listening to this, a lot of it is above my pay grade of understanding. And really, we just need to make sure we get this right this time, because so much more money is going to be coming into the state for broadband that if we really, this is really important for the state to get this right and set up right and the most efficient, easy, understandable, open process. That's just a comment. And the last thing I'd like to say is, on behalf of the town of Alexander, I would like to thank ConnectMaine very, very, very much for this grant. This was a project I started about 2 years ago by funding the engineering study with Tim, helping fund that. And it's a real honor to see such a project be embraced and accepted. And we got money from Maine Community Foundation also, but I'd like to thank ConnectMaine for helping us fund this project for our town.
Great, Mark. You'll need to unmute yourself.
There we go. I got it. Yeah, follow up with Ted, same thing. Thank you, guys. My question's pretty simple. We're doing a delicate ballet with trying to get a bridge loan to hold us to the Maine Bond Bank and all that. So I'm just curious, what's the approximate time frame when that first 25% could show up here so we'll get everything back into you quickly?
We are hoping to get the draft contracts and commencement notice forms out to you all within the coming days so that they can be executed as soon as July 1. And then as soon as the commencement report is completed and approved, we're able to submit it as an invoice for the disbursement of that first 25%. Depending on when during the week that invoice goes through, it could be another week before you actually see that cash in hand.
Okay, good. So mid-July, maybe.
Yep. A lot of ifs, ands, or buts, but hopefully that's, we're trying to get it out as quickly as possible. We know that these projects need to get off the ground.
No, we hear you. Thanks, Steph.
All right. I don't see any other hands. Or Dawn, you unmuted yourself. Do you have a question?
Yeah, I don't know where the hand thing is, but
no, that works.
I have a question for Chris in particular. I've done a lot of these poll survey things and just wondered, does Tilson have some authority to go back to the poll owners and say, you have to change out a poll, because we decree this one to be unsafe? I mean, are you just asking them to do that, or is there some other authority that I'm unaware of at this point? Not trying to be contrary, just trying to figure it out.
Well, here, and I guess, ConnectMaine, they can maybe clarify further after. What would happen is, like I say, generally speaking, most people build their plant in compliance with, electrical standards and safety practices and stuff. Occasionally you do run across something that is a violation, and we all want to be safe. We all want to make sure that the next guy that comes down the street and gets on that pole, that he's not going to have any issues. If there's something that's severe enough where we report that back to ConnectMaine, they have the ability, and please feel free to override me here, but I would assume they have the ability to withhold funds until that is corrected, because it's not the state of Maine's responsibility. It would be you're attaching to that pole. It should be made sure that that pole is compliant with all safety standards. And if you have to go back, as the ISP has to go back to the pole owner and say, we're not in compliance here, we need to have this replaced or upgraded or changed or whatever, reconfigured on the pole, that is up to your responsibility to make that happen.
But we don't have any authority to make them do the job. I mean, we're just kind of victims of whatever space they allow us.
If it's a violation, if it's a safety code violation, they should be wanting to get that resolved. That's going to have somebody will have to pay for that, whether it's the ISP because they need to attach. But these are things that should have been addressed during Make Ready. So by the time we get to the field audit, all of these issues should be resolved. But these are things that have occasionally come up.
Yeah, I have seen it done during Make Ready most of the time. I can't think of a particular instance where they didn't say that they needed to change a pole out when they needed to change a pole. So just curious to.
I mean, I think
see
some
if
of
there
this
was
stuff is
authority there.
rare, but it is, if it's a safety thing, then somebody should be calling somebody on it. So having somebody check on that is, not. We'll figure it out. I don't think it's going to happen much, but if it does, it is in fact a problem because these things are in the right of way with all this crap on it. So.
Hey, sometimes that's my crap. Peggy.
Oh,
Right,
come
thank
on,
you, everybody.
Don. You can blame Mark and Mark can blame you, and this will be a fun, informal meeting all of a sudden. Von Thompson, sorry about however you pronounce your name. You unmuted yourself. Do you have a question?
Well, yeah, I yes, again, want to thank ConnectMaine for this. I'm just a little bit concerned in our situation where the contractor is going to be our Community Development Corporation. And one of the things that I don't think that any of us thought particularly about was, or were aware of, the extent of the reporting requirements for the contribution from ConnectMaine. And so it's going to be a bit of a task to get that done within our financial means, because it's not something that was anticipated to be that extensive.
I'm sure a lot of internet service providers are feeling the same type of pain. And that's one reason we're doing this workshop before you even sign a contract. We want to try to work and assist everybody through this new process. But again, it is something that we're having to do in large part because we are acquiring significant amount of funds from very public sources, and we're responsible for the use of those funds.
I understand. Thank you.
Any
I also
other
think
questions?
it's important. This is David. Important to note that a lot of these things are things that should be done by the ISP, anyway throughout the project. And so hopefully you can piggyback on a lot of the work that they've already done, in the mapping, the network, designs, a lot of the technical stuff, and then be able to pull together a lot of the financial reporting, from there. So.
Tim, you got your hand up again?
Yeah. So are we going to have to share our design information with Tilson?
I don't know, Chris, if you want to do an overview back on that network piece.
From what he said in his overview, he's going to go and take a look at the original design documentation, make sure that all the fiber access terminals are where they're supposed to be and where the splice closures and slack loops are supposed to be. So that means that they're going to have access to the design that we come up with, we're going to give that to them?
Chris, you're muted.
Yeah, I figured that one out. Yes, yeah, we will have your designs. That's how we were going to verify that the plant is built and it's
Yep.
meeting the addresses that are in being awarded. So yes, we will have those. And we, like I say, I put them on my tablet. I go to the field. When I drive out, I have an app that when I drive down the road, I can tell you that, you know what, in 2 poles, there's going to be a splice enclosure on that pole. Get to that point. Yep, there it is. So then you verify that, yeah, the plant has been built according to the design. It's been approved and you go from there.
Fabulous. Thanks.
Hey, Steph, this is Mark. I don't know how to raise my hand either. Can I ask?
Yeah, no, unmuting is perfect.
Okay, sorry about that. One of the things that might be helpful that's been a challenge in Maine is finding a certified PE at a price that makes sense to do the work that you're asking for. And Tilson is one of those operators that does that kind of work. And we've worked with them in the past. So good. It's all good from my perspective, but I just wanted to be clear, you know, I assume that that might be, I mean, there aren't that many PEs that have this kind of background in Maine that do things for reasonable pricing. We've been working with USDA, you know the ins and outs of that process and the difficulties of hiring PEs and how expensive they are. So it is a fairly difficult and expensive process that maybe some of the applicants weren't aware of. So as an overarching question, would the state be interested, or could the state be helpful in helping these towns or these communities, whatever these projects, understand what the resources are out there and what they're exactly looking for from the PE standpoint?
That might be a great topic to dive into at a future Q&A with Tilson. We did make sure that we included the option that you not use a PE, but another type of engineer who happens to have the experience around cable and fiber networks.
Okay.
In part because we recognize that this is a difficulty in Maine being, you know, such a rural place to begin with.
Cool. I guess I missed that little nuance. Sorry about that. Thank you.
Yeah, sorry. There's a big or both in the audit form as well as in the workshop presentation. So hopefully you'll catch that or later.
Okay. Fair enough. Thank you.
Hi, this is Fred from Tilson. Thanks, Stephanie. I just wanted to mention we actually gave that issue quite a bit of consideration. Initially, we had thought that to mimic other grant efforts, a PE stamp would be required, but it's not a reasonable requirement. Ultimately, we determined, but somebody with an appropriate level of expertise and familiarity with the network design will be sufficient certification. I also just wanted to take a brief moment to address the previous concerns with Tilson's involvement in the project and the fact that we are, yes, a vertically integrated telecommunications company that does consulting as well as a variety of other things such as design, engineering, operations, and construction. You know, we come across this all the time, pretty much on a daily basis, reviewing opportunities for consulting and construction and operation. And it's something we wade through very carefully and very thoughtfully on a daily basis, on a regular basis. And I would just try to allay your concerns with our, you know, involvement in this project on a, you know, in competitive terms. Thanks.
Crystal has her hand up. You'll need to unmute yourself.
So I'm the treasurer for Down East Broadband Utilities, and who Alexander is a part of. So I'm obviously all about the finances, and the money reporting piece was a very short piece of this. I assume most of the details of that's going to get laid out in the contract as to who to send invoices to, who to send the Excel spreadsheet to, if it has to be PDF, if it has to be some other format, and you know, how often this gets done. I know it said 1 to 2 progress reports, and our drawdowns would be based on percentage of total costs, but I know most other contracts with the state have required some kind of monthly reporting, quarterly reporting, something at least annually, and I didn't find much in the way of detail on that in this workshop.
Yeah, we did gloss over because we wanted enough time to focus in on the audit stuff, which was new. The notice of commencement and the progress report are both Word documents on our website that you can download when you're ready. And you can fill it out and submit it either as a Word document, or you can PDF it, however is convenient for you to do so. The notice of commencement asks for basically confirmation that the budget is what you proposed in the application. If there's any changes, to please indicate them. And then also, as mentioned during the workshop, to indicate your expected quarterly need for grant disbursements so that we can make, in turn, our request for the bond funds in a quarterly basis. So you'll see that type of table both in the commencement and the progress reports in order for us to be able to track over all the projects, how much we need to have available for you all to make those requests. And then the spending report is an Excel spreadsheet, again, on our website that you can submit as the Excel file, or you can PDF it out. If you PDF it out, it needs to be perfect for us to use it, right? So I would encourage you just to send these without PDFing them. And then the spending report is done after you've actually spent funds, right? You have invoices, you have real expenditures that you're reporting on. So at least at the progress report, very rarely do we have projects that get started before commencement notice. And then the progress report, we are going to be asking for it on a quarterly basis. That is a little bit new. Again, because of the way that we have to make requests and track our funds under the bond. So that will be new, not only for infrastructure grants, but also planning grants. And then the other reason that we didn't really go into a lot of detail on the submissions here is because we're hopefully going to be transitioning to an online portal this late summer, fall. And we don't know exactly when that moment is going to happen, but we will make sure that we provide substantial assistance to all grant recipients to move through that new process as smoothly as possible when it does occur. But for now, each of these report documents includes instructions at the top that explain how to submit. And it is email at this point. Everything is submitted via email.
Okay, great, thank you.
Great questions. Do we have any more? All right. I don't know if anybody else wants to have the last word here, or I just repeat my thanks to you all for taking the time to join this workshop and ask questions and be prepared for a slightly more onerous process than in years past.
Yeah, thanks for coming. And you know, if you have questions, we'll suffer through them and see if we can answer them.
Okay, and the recording of this is going to be emailed out to us, or at least a link to it?
Yeah, the link to our website with it'll be on the same link that was shared in the workshop and emails before the awards section under infrastructure. We'll put the workshop recording as well as the PDF form of the slides there for you all to be able to share further with your other partners.
Awesome. Thank you.
Great. Hopefully we'll be reaching out, like I said, over the next week with draft contracts, and hopefully we can get these projects underway as the new fiscal year starts. All right, thank you, everyone. Have a great rest of the afternoon.
Thanks, Stephanie.
Thank you.